Hey guys, welcome back. So today, we're working on this Stihl BR400 leaf blower. And I found this one on Facebook Marketplace for $70. And according to the seller, it ran last year. Fast forward to this year and it would not start. He believed it was a carb issue. So I picked it up thinking that this was going to be an easy fix, especially since I had an extra carb from fixing that BR400. I was going to add this as bonus footage to that video. And as you can see, things escalated. It was not a simple fix. So this is no longer bonus footage. This deserves a video of its own. So I'm filming the intro here kind of midstream. And the plan is to catch you guys up to kind of see how we got here. So I'm going to start back at the beginning where I just brought this thing home, and I wanted to validate the diagnosis. There was no fuel in the tank, so I decided to add some fuel and pull it over and kind of go from there. So without further ado, let's get going on this. Choke's already on, ignition's on, we'll give it a bit of throttle, and watch it just starts. Yep, and we get nothing, so I'm going to pull the plug real quick, just put a little fuel down there, make sure it kicks off. Make sure all that dirt is out of there before pulling the plug. Now, this plug, I'm not sure what brand it is. Oh, it's a Champion. RCJ6Y. And it's actually wet. So that is interesting. Let me just pull the engine over. I think it's flooded out. And now that I'm looking at the ground, we are losing fuel out of this machine. So, yeah, we've got an issue here. I hope the tank isn't broken, but I can't think of any other thing that would be causing this, since it's a fuel pump that pulls the fuel up. I guess I know why the tank was empty when I got it. Nothing obvious here other than the fact that the top of the tank is wet. So it must have come from the carb. I actually did loosen the cap when I saw it flooding over. So I'm thinking the tank built pressure like we saw on the other machine. It's allowed to build about 3 pounds of pressure, and the needle should be able to hold that back. And I actually just saw a drip from the airbox. So yeah, it is carb issues. The needle can't hold back the pressure from the tank. So, yeah, let's just get this carb off. Probably leave the air filter off. It's absolutely soaked. And we'll put the clone on there. We'll just mop up this fuel, maybe move to a dry spot, and try to start this. I think I just missed a video clip. Anyway, you didn't miss much. I just got the old leaking carb out. This one actually is an OEM Walbro, so it's worth rebuilding. I don't have that kit right now, so we will stick with the plan and get the clone installed in its place. So I've tightened the cap back up. So we'll just give it a second, see if we have any leaks. And we'll just start cleaning this mess while we wait. The ignition, it's still turned off. Before I put the plug in, though, I want to pull it over. Just make sure it's not flooded with fuel. And it looks like we're pretty dry. So we'll give it just a little bit. Now the carb that's on here, I know we were messing with the settings quite a bit on that other BR400, so I'm pretty sure we're going to be way off. Let's just see where we're at right now on the low speed. About 3.5, so I'm going to back it out a little bit more than 1.5, and I do see a few drips actually coming from the starter recoil, which is kind of odd. Yeah, I'm not sure what to think of that. All right, I say we try to start it. All right, let's give this a try. I've got the throttle partially open. I'm going to leave the choke open since it was pretty flooded. Might take a few pulls to clear it out. Yeah, we get nothing. So I'm willing to bet the plug is just too wet. Or maybe we don't have spark. Yeah, actually that plug is soaked. Let me dry it real quick. We'll try it again. Yeah, a little bit of fuel and oil in there. All right, we'll try it again. Choke off. We'll put the glove on first because that kind of hurts. Yeah, I see a little bit of smoke. It's trying. I'm going to open the throttle some more, actually all the way. Try a little choke, well, all the choke. Now the choke's off again. Almost. Yeah. Should we keep going? All right, so it is acting funny. We're getting some backfires, so might be a bad plug. Maybe we're still flooded. Could be timing. Let's try a different plug. All right, new plug's installed. I'm gonna bring the throttle down a bit. Interesting. I'm not sure what to think about this one. I mean, the seller was right. It absolutely had a carb issue. It was flooding severely, and I'm still kind of leaning towards the engine being flooded out, and that's why it's not running. You know, potentially the exhaust could also be full of fuel. So, yeah, maybe a timing issue, maybe it's flooded, or maybe it's something else. I guess I'm not sure, but I think the easiest thing to do right now is just take the exhaust off. We'll tip it to the side, just make sure it's not full of fuel and oil. And assuming that checks out, I think we're going to need to dig into the timing. Do you hear that? That's me shaking the exhaust. Not empty. Just a bunch of old fuel and oil. And I'm willing to bet the bottom half of the crankcase is in similar condition. So we got the majority of it out. I think I'm just going to pull it over with the ignition turned off, see if anything comes out, maybe even tip this up on its side in case there's fuel down on the bottom end. Maybe we can get some of it out. Nope, nothing in the bottom end. Let's try this again. The ignition is still turned on. We have partial throttle. We'll do choke off. And it just popped out of the intake. So I'm leaning towards a timing issue at this point. Give it some choke. Yeah, and it just came out the intake again. So I think we have a timing issue. It is possible to check the timing without taking things apart. Right here, this is the coil. It's actually to the left of the starter recoil and on the front of the engine where the flywheel is. Now I marked right there with a Sharpie line where the magnet starts. Like right there, this screw sticks. And we're at top dead center, so actually the magnet should be just clearing the coil, and instead the magnet is just going under the coil. So if I keep rotating, the piston's actually going down right now. And the intake port is about to open, and you see that other line, that's where the magnet ends. So right there, the screw still sticks. I go a little further, it doesn't stick anymore. So that's the end of the magnet. And right there is when it's going to spark. And yeah, unfortunately, the piston's in the wrong spot. So let me see if I can show you this. So right now, the piston should be going down. Now it's coming back up. And we're just at top dead center now. We'll take another look at those magnets. It should be clearing the coil. And I do see a line. So that's either the start of the magnet or the end of the magnet. You know, either way, that line should be past the lamination. So let me get you in here a little bit better. We'll keep rotating. So right there it would spark, assuming that was the end of the magnet. Yeah, and it was. So that would be a late spark, and I think that's why we're getting it popping out of the intake like it is. So the only way to fix that is to actually get the blower opened up for the leaf blower portion of that. So we need to get this piece off, remove a bunch of bolts, remove the fan, and eventually we'll get down to that flywheel. I'm not exactly sure the purpose of this, but it is holding the two halves together, so we do need to get this cap off. So this is what we're after right here. This is the flywheel. Now, I'm not sure if this is a right-hand or left-hand thread, but let's try it. Yeah, it was kind of wishful thinking that might come off. Well, let me get a light, shine it in there, see if I can tell if that key is broken. Yeah, I think the only way we're going to know for sure is to get that flywheel off. And I don't know if I have a puller that can do it. I think the best chance is using my 3-job puller, assuming there's enough room. So let's get these bolts out going around here. That'll free the engine from this piece of plastic, and with any luck, we'll have enough space to get the puller behind that flywheel. Almost free. Well, unfortunately, I don't have a puller that can get this flywheel off safely, so I might have to make something or potentially order something. You know, I don't want to do something that's going to cause damage, because right now, I believe it's only a sheared flywheel key. And once that's fixed, this should be up and running. Anyway, now that we're in this far, we can actually see the magnet. So if I rotate the engine, you can see the magnets right there. So when that second magnet clears the coil right about there, that's when it's going to spark. So let's just take a look at the piston. We'll rotate the engine again until we're at top dead center, which is right there. And we'll take a look at the flywheel. those magnets should be clearing, but they're not. They're nowhere in sight. And if I keep going, right there is when it's going to spark. And the piston's already well on its way down. So yeah, 100%. We need to get this off, get a new key in there, and we should be in business. All right, so now you guys are all caught up to where we were at the beginning of this video. We need to get the flywheel off, inspect the key, and I think what we're going to see is that it's broken. So I did go ahead and order a couple new keys, and I want to get these installed as soon as possible because they've already been lost twice in the last 24 hours. First time my wife accidentally threw them away. So after going through 4 trash bags, I finally found them. I put them in this sandwich bag and put it right next to the door for the garage, and they disappeared again. Come to find out, after about 2 hours of looking, found it next to my dog's bed. He had eaten the bag and thankfully left the keys behind. So yeah, I want to get these installed right away. So to get the flywheel off, there's a few different ways we can go about this. I think the safest is to use a puller. And I have this one here, which I think will work. The biggest hang-up was just that I didn't have the right size bolt to thread into these holes, but now I do. These are M5 bolts, 0.8 thread pitch. So I picked up 3 of those. And of course, the head is a little bit small for this puller, so we're going to have to use some combination of washers and nuts to keep that bolt from pulling through. So yeah, let's get the puller on. We'll start pulling, and hopefully we get this flywheel off without breaking anything. So I'm actually going to start just by marking the crankshaft where the key should be based on what I'm seeing on the flywheel. Of course, I don't think we're going to see that based on the testing I've done. I'm thinking the keyway is actually going to be more over here, about 90 degrees to the left of that mark. So yeah, let's get the flywheel off and find out. That flywheel is on there. I'm going to tap it lightly with the hammer just to see if that shock will pop it off. There we go. Yeah, I called it. The line is right there, kind of on the top. Let me turn this light on so you can see a little better. So right now the line is pointing up. If we look there, there's no keyway. But if we look about 90 degrees to the left, there is what's left of the key. So, yeah, just a broken key. I think the bigger question is, how do you do this on a leaf blower? It's not like a lawnmower where you hit something and the engine stops suddenly. A leaf blower, that shouldn't happen. My best guess is that this nut was loose. Actually, it was definitely loose because when I went to take it off, it came off very quickly. So, likely it wasn't torqued properly. Potentially there was a critter in here and someone pulled the engine over and just broke the key. So let's see if we can get what's left out and get that new key installed. Nope. There we go. So to torque the flywheel down, we're going to need to lock up the engine. You can put rope in here. That does a good job. I guess the only concern is that the rope can get caught in either of the ports. You can also use a piston stop, which I have one. I'm not a big fan of them. I'm always a little bit nervous that I'm going to damage something, but they do work quite well, and a lot of people use them without issues. So I think I've resigned myself to using it. I'm just rotating until we hit the piston stop, which is right there. And then we torque it to 17.5 foot-pounds. So I'm going to do the same test as before. I'm just rotating the engine right now until the piston's all the way at the top, which is right there. And if we look at the flywheel, you can see there's a magnet right there, and the magnet is ending right there. So that timing looks good to me. So I think this is going to run. You know, it was actually trying to run when the timing was off. So let's get this back together and try it out again. pretty much ready to go. I've added some fuel to the tank, and I've actually reset the needles. They're both 1.5 turns out, so assuming it starts, which it should, we will fine tune those to get it to run a bit better. And I've got the ignition turned on, the choke's on, and we have partial throttle. So let's give it a few pulls and see what happens. Nice. That was a lot better. It only took a few pulls, started right up, the engine sounded great, and the initial settings actually of a turn and a half each were fairly close. I was able to rev the engine up, and it idled fairly well. Anyway, I was starting to make some adjustments here just to fine-tune it, and notice there was a bunch of fuel kind of coming out of that bushing right there. So we do need a new one of those. So rather than risk it, I decided to shut it down. So let me pause it here. I'm going to place an order. We'll get a new bushing, and then we'll finish this thing up and try it out. Well, it's actually been about 2 weeks, and getting this bushing is proving to be a little bit more challenging than I thought. I guess the first issue was that the parts diagram for the BR400 actually doesn't show this part or the part number. So, thankfully a quick Google search turned up the part number that I think will work. So I ordered a quality aftermarket part made by Rotary, and that part kind of got lost in the mail. Or actually not lost, but it's taking a tour of the country. I guess the postal system has made a few mistakes on that. So yeah, it's still en route. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to show up, so I kind of gave up waiting and ordered, I would say, a lesser quality aftermarket part from Amazon. It's actually a package of 5. So that should get us up and running. Worst case, if these do fail, I have the Rotary as a backup. Thankfully, during those 2 weeks, it kind of gave me some time to deal with this right here. I took this tube back off. It's actually supposed to be straight, not have this 90-degree bend. So what I did was I straightened it out and put a heavy flywheel on it to hold it straight and applied some heat and did that for 2 weeks. And as you can see, that had very little effect. So rather than fighting this anymore, I actually just ended up ordering a new old stock tube. It was only about $11. I think shipping was about the same. So I think it's probably better to go that route than continue to fight with that one. Anyway, let's get this problem fixed, and then we'll move on, fix the tube. I've got a few other tune-up items, and we'll get this thing outside. going to try to do this in place without pulling the carburetor. I don't think you really need to. Assuming I can get this fuel line off, though, it's kind of petrified. There we go. I've already drained the tank of fuel, so we'll just take the cap out. And I'm just going to use this wire from a wire hanger with a little hook on it to hook the fuel line in the tank and pull it up and out so we can cut the filter off. We'll pull the fuel line out, push the bushing in, fish it out, and then install the new one. Yeah, it might be actually easier to pull it out. Yep. So you want to make sure this is nice and clean so that new bushing has a chance of sealing. So I'm going to use a bit of 2-stroke oil here to help with the installation. I'm going to get the trigger control installed on the tube while it's still disconnected on the other end. I'm going to leave all the screws loose for now, until we get everything roughly in place. We'll get it calibrated to where we want it. Then we can snug everything up. Yeah, it's actually pretty good right there. Yeah, I'm glad I got this tube. It's going to make a big difference on how usable this machine is. Anyway, we are more or less ready to finish this up. I want to get the plastics on. Before I do that, I might pull this plug. It'll make it a little bit easier. Plus, this is not exactly the right NGK plug. I did get a new one, so we'll get that installed. I think before I do any of that, though, this spark arrestor is missing, and it's a discontinued part. I was able to find an aftermarket one, so let's get that one installed and then finish it up. Yeah, I can tell already it's not a great part. This is actually A little bit unlevel. This lip is supposed to be longer for the clamp. So we might not be able to use this. And it's a pretty tight fit. Let me tap that a little bit, see if it'll go all the way in. Oh, it's so close. But that is the difference between OEM and aftermarket. Things aren't quite the same. This is actually the OEM clip, which is tight on the OEM spark arrestor. And this spark arrestor, it's just a little bit wider. So, yeah, I might have to tap this a little bit more. Oop. I think that might be it. So the correct plug for this machine, according to the manual, is a BP-MR7A with 20 thousandths of a gap. This one I double checked. It's a touch over, but it is close enough. It's actually a lot closer than the plug that was in there. So, we'll tighten this down. This plug's never been installed, so you do have to turn it more than normal to crush that washer. And then if you reinstall it later, you don't actually have to turn it that much because that washer's already been crushed. Yep, right there feels good. Let's start it up real quick. I want to rev it a few times and just double check down here around the bushing. Make sure there's no fuel leaking out. It's going to be a little bit hard to show you this now that we're back together, but I think you can see the bushing right there. And if you look around it, we are nice and dry. The bushing itself, it is a little bit shiny. I think that is just the 2-stroke oil, though, that I used to install it. So I think we're ready to go. So let's get this outside. Well, guys, that's pretty much a wrap. You know, when I saw this one come up for sale the day after fixing the other BR400, I really couldn't pass it up. You know, it was only $70. I had extra parts from the other fix, not to mention the knowledge as far as how this machine is put together. And I kind of like this machine, so it was kind of a no-brainer buying it. Although it didn't turn out to be a quick fix, it was a fairly straightforward fix. It was the combination of the carb and the flywheel key. You know, once those two things were fixed, this thing came right to life. Now, I guess the question in my mind is, which came first, the carb issue or the flywheel issue? You know, I'm not really sure, but it was the combination of the two that prevented this machine from running. Anyway, it is running now. You know, we did a few tune-up items, and now this thing is more or less perfect. So, I hope this video helps someone. Thanks for watching.